Running for mayor? I'm kidding. Just kidding. All right, well, I know Josh and lots of folks are co-hosting, and so I just want to say that, you know, I live here, my kids eat here from the first day they open, so this is good. This is like, you know. No, but I mean, you know, Joah and Heliga, when they told me over dinner after his act show that he's running for District 9, I'm like, why? You know?
Why are you doing this?
I think local politics is where the needle is moved, so, you know, I think these are meaningful work, and I full disclosure, I do land development for a living, so I've been around a lot of candidates, and I think they're rare to have like a genuine candidate that jump into a race for issue that they care about. There's definitely other stuff, but I feel like Joe is so open to learn about other issues that, like, hey, just come at him. And so I'm glad to be able to again represent a group of folks here that try to bring people here to hear some genuine voice in local politics. So
yeah,
Joe, take it
thank
away.
you. Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Nat. Thank you so much for everyone, Josh, everyone who helped put this together. I'll be super brief, but 3 things. I'll tell you a little bit about myself for those who aren't familiar, and then I'll tell you why I'm running, because most people, that's their first question. And then I'll tell you why I'm running right now, which I think actually is more important than why I'm running. So my name is Joah Spearman. I grew up 55 or so miles north of here in Killeen. Youngest of 3 boys, single mother, working 2-3 jobs my whole childhood, watching her really live her 20s and 30s raising us in scarcity. And I'm very fortunate that early in my life, whether it was watching, I don't know, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Cosby Show or something, but something switched in me that made me realize that it was possible to live differently than the way that my family had been living for generations, really. So I kind of put my head down and I worked hard in school, and I applied to 110 scholarships, and I won like 30 of them. The rodeo scholarship I won, the March of Dime scholarship. So lo and behold, I was able to come here to Austin to go to UT. First person in my family to graduate from college, which is the second coolest college story in my family now, because last summer at 60 years old, my mom graduated from college. I think that's important, because I think a lot of what's happening in Austin right now is there's this growing, what I would say is what's attractive to Austin, or what has been attractive to Austin, I think, is that people, whether they grew up the way that I grew up, or they grew up in much more abundance, Austin has been a place that I think has attracted people here, whether they're creators or students, young professionals, families. And I think what we're seeing right now is that there's a growing kind of chasm, I think, between people who are living in scarcity and then people who are living in abundance, of which Austin is really kind of terraforming very aggressively towards those people. My lived experience, I think, is really important in thinking about not just why I'm running, but also what I bring to the table. But to answer the question as to why I'm running because I think, like many of you, are seeing what's happening in the city. I think we're all witnessing what's happening in the city while it happening to us as well. And I honestly just got tired of being a witness. We've seen Austin growing from a population standpoint, from a development standpoint for years. But during the pandemic, I think a lot of these things accelerated because we didn't have things like South by Southwest happening. We saw a lot of local businesses close or struggle, laying off people. And then we also saw an influx of people who, I would say this is a city that has historically catered to the creative class, whether that's musicians and artists, entrepreneurs, small business owners, chefs. And we're seeing more and more where this city is becoming more and more a city for those in the asset class, which is a different thing, right? That's a consumption mentality as opposed to contribution and creation mentality. And so I'm running because I feel like I bring a unique point of view to council, and more importantly to District 9, which is the front door to Austin. When people think of Austin, they literally think of District 9, whether they know it or not. And so I think this is a district where you can really set the tone for the city. in that conversation around assets, creativity, consumption versus contribution. And I have the track record around nonprofit board service or serving on city commissions to really back up that I understand that nuance. But again, the most important question that I think is meaningful to ask and for me to answer is why now? So here we are in 2022, and we know there are crazy things happening globally. Obviously, there's a war happening in Russia and Ukraine. There's obviously nationally there's things happening with Roe v. Wade that are at the federal level. And at the state level, we know that there's a governor's race coming up, that's going to be pretty high profile as well. But at the end of the day, your day-to-day lives, our day-to-day lives are really shaped at the local level. And this is a time, we're at a very unique, I don't even want to say fork in the road, because that would imply that there's a very binary route that Austin can take from here. I would just say we're at a very unique inflection point where there are a lot of different potential Austins. And without even knowing all of you very intimately, I know that all of us share a sense of what we want Austin to be. I know that we all want Austin to be affordable, and that's very relative to who you are, where you live, what you mean by that, but we want it to be affordable. I know that we also want Austin to be creative. We don't want to live in a city where everyone works at the same company we work for, and there's no musicians and no artists and no one working at the cool restaurants. And we know we want a city that's creative. And then I think most importantly, we want a city that's inclusive. I think if you look at this very room, you see a sense of inclusion that isn't common, I think, in Austin. And I would say that affordability is something that we need to preserve. I would say creativity is something that we need to foster and help thrive. And then inclusion is something that we just, as a city, haven't worked hard enough to do historically. We're coming up here, we're only about 6 years out from the centennial of the very racially motivated 1928 city plan for Austin. And I think it behooves us to recognize that history and think about what can we do, what kinds of policies can we set as a city to make sure that we don't create a path for another 100 years that's just as segregated and racist and less inclusive as the last 100 years. So I'm really, really excited. I think that I am so far running the most grassroots and authentic campaign. Those are key pillars of my campaign. I'm really excited because I'm an entrepreneur. So most of you know that already. And so everything that I've ever done professionally pretty much is usually years ahead of the market or customers wanting that thing. And I think that there's a great opportunity to bring that experience set to the city because we have a city that mostly has acted very latently on issues around homelessness, around housing, around transit, around equity. It's appalling to me that it wasn't until November of 2020 that City Council had a homelessness summit, for example. Because if you live in downtown or District 9 in general, you know that homelessness has been a problem in Austin for years. It's upsetting to me that only now is Austin kind of throwing the City Council throwing the kitchen sink at, what can we do to help with affordable housing? Or what can we do with VMU zoning and all these things that honestly were on the table 5+ years ago, but there was not the political will to do it. So I think what we have is a council that historically has been very latent. It's very much they
wait until they have to.
Yeah. That's exactly what's happened. And I mean, here's one last anecdote there. In 2000, I don't know, how many of you have lived in Austin, let's say, how many of you lived in Austin more than 10 years? And how many of you less than 5 years? So this is like pretty representative, I think, actually. In 2000, there was a transit vote that for something, it wasn't exactly like Project Connect, but it was something similar at the time. And it lost by a little over I think it was a little over 1%. And what hasn't been happening with our council is that even though it was a very close race that was defeated in 2000, there was no narrative going on for the last 20 years, for the better part of that, about, wow, half of this city is not being represented in the sense of what they envision for this city. And so I think there's this, and that's what I mean by the binary thing I said earlier, because you're going to be hearing a lot of candidates talk about affordability and housing over the next several months. Everyone's going to be saying things like YIMBY or NIMBY or transit corridors and ADUs, all these different terminology. And the reality is, all that stuff is great to know, but the most important thing, the most fundamental thing, is a solution orientation around affordability. However we get there, let's get creative. Let's throw the kitchen sink at getting creative about how to get that done. But I really want you all to try not to fall into those very clear camps of, oh, I'm this or I'm this, because this race, and honestly where the city is the solutions are too big for one group, whether they're 50% or 49%. There's just, the problems are too big for one part of Austin to solve. We really, all of us need to say we agree that affordability is an issue, for example, and we all want to contribute to the solution, whether it's the solution that you came up with or not. So I really am excited because I think that while we have all these challenges, the flip side of those challenges is a lot of opportunity. And I'm running because
Far more interested in getting reelected than they are in doing the job right, and who haven't humbled themselves to the job and to the work and to the mission and to the people, and instead are looking out for number one. And I think that's why they don't listen. And I love that about you. You've had a career before this, and you're gonna have a career after this, and you're in it for the right reasons. You're sure as hell not in it for the money. You're sure as hell not in it for the power. You're in it for the right reasons, and I love that about you. But I think that we're at a place now where the career politicians who are looking out for themselves and the cohorts who got them there are doing more damage than good.
yeah.
The end.
I'll say I'm Jamin. I'm also one of the co-hosts.
And you live in the neighborhood.
And I live in the neighborhood. Newly live in the neighborhood, not newly to Austin. I was born here a very long time ago. I've known Joah for 15 years now. He's one of my closest friends. I can say that there's not anyone that I know who's more genuine and more of a natural leader than Joah, and I think those are qualities that are sort of built for this. And I think along the same lines of what you were talking about, I also don't know anybody who's more willing to change his mind based on new information, which I think is something that politics in general is just lacking today, and I think particularly at the local level. And so I can't think of a person better suited for this than Joe.
I'll jump in. Yeah. So Aaron DeFose, I met Joe. Must have been like 2012, 2011, something like that. 2011. We worked at a company called Bizarre Voice together, and I mean the reason I'm here is like not only was I just personally impressed by him when I met him, and I figured, man, this is like a go-getter that's going to figure out and will turn every stone to make sure you like get something done. But then when you went off and started Localora as a CEO, man, that's like passion project, grit. Like I know, like all entrepreneurs, it hasn't been easy, and like we've had the opportunity to chat along the way, and like just watching you navigate all that. To your point, like change your mind, figure it out, right? So the combination of like grit, authenticity, and just being like a real person. I was like, that's the sort of person that I want representing me. So that's my reason.
So here's the plug. Most of you have already donated to my campaign, but in case you don't know, the city of Austin has a $400 per person donation limit. So my hope is that you're willing to reach the $400 max donation for my campaign if you haven't done so already. Your spouse or partner can do that as well. And my website is joah4austin.com. I'd love for you, when you get home tonight, text or email 5 people who live in your neighborhood or work with you and say, hey, like, I just went to this fundraiser, Joah spoke, I think, whatever. And if you'd be willing to share that with those friends, coworkers, neighbors, that'd be amazing. We, like I said, running a super grassroots campaign. Actually, Jess here is going to be the first person I've hired on my team. So that just happened like in the last like 72 hours. And so yeah, really trying to build a grassroots team here, and I think that's really important because the point that Josh said, there are a lot of entrenched people in Austin, and And the only way that we're going to kind of get ourselves out of that and get ourselves out of all these issues that we have, I think, is opening up space to have more people come in, more perspective. And so it can't be this, you know, like I was telling someone earlier, like, you won't have to come to City Hall to talk to me about an issue. Like, if there's an issue in the city, then I will come to you. That's where the issue is happening. So if you're in a music venue, you in a restaurant, like, city council members, I think, especially for District 9, need to be going into the community and hearing what's happening. That City Hall is not an ivory tower. And it's upsetting to me when I talk to small business owners in particular who were like, oh, I don't know who my city council member is, or they haven't reached out to me. I mean, really quick, I don't know how many of you are familiar with No Comply, a skate shop. It's in District 9. Yeah. No Comply is an awesome skate shop, 12th, just off between kind of Rio Grande and Lamar. And for a lot of people, it's easy to look at that as like, oh, it's a skate shop, and that's it. But no, it's a community, is what that is. And so when they got a demolition notice on their door saying that, oh, a week from now there's a hearing to demolish their location of 13 years, I'm very fortunate that the owner of the business reached out to me, not because I'm in city council, but because he knows that I'm someone who will advocate for him. So we sat down and mapped out, like, what can we do? We were able to galvanize support and not only stop the demolition from happening, but also now he's under much more favorable terms with his landlord. And that doesn't happen with most city council offices because they just look at that as like some small business. They don't realize there's a community there. So a lot of what I'm excited to bring to the table is this notion that when people say the business community is, you know, moving to Austin or moving to Texas, a lot of times we're talking about these massive employers. Like, I have 5,000 employees. No, but this is a city that, Austin is special because of companies that have 1 to oftentimes maybe even 50 employees. Like, those are the companies that have made this city what it is, and they've built the flywheel of why people come here, whether that's a music venue or a restaurant. And it's really important that we don't get to this place where we do have one of the problems that San Francisco's had, actually, where you're doing so much work to attract the big employers that you're forgetting those small creatives and entrepreneurs that made your city go in the first place. So.
Oh, yes.
You want to see anyone else? Anyone?
Questions?
Cool. Yeah, questions. Seriously.
Oh, I had a question.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, several. How many people? I was around the post. How many of the people here have been in Austin for more than 10 years?
It was
it
probably,
like 80-20?
Probably 2/3.
Yeah, 2/3. So so then I'm curious because we're engaged people in the local politics. Who are your leaders, like at the local level, or who have you reached out to already? Either current or former elected officials that we may know, and just kind of curious.
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's 2 parts of that that come to mind. One is, in running a non-traditional campaign, with the exception of Kevin Michael Foster, who is on the AISD school board and I've known for 15 plus years, I have not proactively sought any endorsements from public officials. Even though I'm friends with many of them, I've known them for years, I could get them, but I've really, in trying to make my campaign different, I want people to vote for me. Not for something that they've seen somewhere or they've heard, but for me. And I think that's really important because if I'm going to do the job effectively, I need to have a lot of political capital, and that's not going to happen because so on and so on. That's going to happen because people believe that I can get something done for them. And so I say that because I have met with probably all the public officials in this city. Angelica can attest that she knows. I've met with everyone. But even Sarah Eckhart, our state senator, she lives 5 houses down the street from us. I specifically told her I don't want you to endorse me. I just want, if anything, I would ask you to be neutral. And so while that allows me to make it so they can talk to me openly. It's not like, hey, I need you to tell me the thing that's going to help me or not them. Or just I want to have a conversation with you. Like I had lunch with Gina Hinojosa, who's a state representative. I sat down with Kathy for an hour and a half, a month ago. I'm not asking for endorsement. I just wanted to get to know her and learn more about, what she's thinking about. So that's part of it. And then in terms of the local piece, I'm really, I mean, I'm meeting as many people as possible. I mean, I have this goal of meeting 1,500 people one-on-one, and I'm probably about 900 people in. So I'm really 30 people a week at least. I'm meeting one-on-one, and so that's nonprofit leaders like Colin Wallace, who runs the Austin Parks Foundation. He lives in the neighborhood. He's one of my supporters. Paul Scott, who runs Health Alliance for Austin Musicians. It's restaurateurs, so Phil here, these guys, Fiore and Adam. It's musicians. I'm really just trying to talk to everyone because everyone makes up this community, and I think for City Hall, honestly, they're probably over-indexed on creating space for paid lobbyists or people who basically buy their access into those meetings. And what I want to kind of relay to people is I'm out in the community. I'm going to the shows with you. I'm going to Barton Springs Pool. I'm at the music festivals. I'm going to the local restaurants. I'm doing the things in the community. So it's less of a function of come to me and try to grasp the power that I have, and more of like, no, you have power, and what can we do together to make that beneficial for the city? I could give you a whole list of names, but what I would say is, a friend of ours, Eugene Sepulveda, is very involved in local politics, and I think Eugene and he's a great example, I think, of what I'm trying to bring to the table, which is he knows me because we've been, I've been involved in the city things for a while, as is he, even much longer. I'm an entrepreneur. He's got an Entrepreneurs Foundation. But he and I have openly and publicly disagreed on issues, many issues over 10 years. I mean, you know what I mean? Like he is not supporting me because we are in lockstep on every topic. He's supporting me, I think, because he understands that I'm going to approach these issues being willing to listen to everyone, being very pragmatic about them.
You give some very good civil discourse.
Yeah, and I think that's just so missing. I think we see what happens nationally when that's missing. We see what's happening at the state level when that's missing. So I think it's just really important that people feel like I'm a person. I'm not this person that because I have a public office, I'm now inaccessible. You can still just email me or text or whatever, and I'll be there. So my hope is that by the time we get to October, November, people that have a question for me, they've been able to get in contact with me. So seriously, if you have any friends who are like, I want you to meet my friend, I'm down. It's May. It's early May. I have time. I will make time to meet people. Because if they're a friend of yours, then it's probably someone of high value that I should meet. So I think that's really important because it's politics. Part of the problem with it is that it feels so like you can't change it. It's too big, And I think one of the ways to tackle the bigness of it is to make it more one-on-one and make it more feel like a community. And I think everything I've ever done professionally, personally, is very much rooted in community. Anyone else?
So, nice to meet you. I'm here for Sustainable Food Center. Yes, I want you to meet my people. We run the farmers market in downtown. We're gonna celebrate 20 years in June. I'm just having a conversation with Jessica.
Yeah.
And I live here too.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Well,
and nice to meet you with your beautiful wife.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. We are. Well, she's a phenomenal cook, and we love supporting local restaurants, even like local farmers. We just got a farm box delivered.
That's heaven.
And it's funny. I know the work that Fiore, Adam, Good Work Austin, all the work they're doing. Like in a lot of ways, what we've done with issues like food insecurity or homelessness or even like healthcare for musicians, we take these issues. And because we're in Texas, we're in this, the way that Evan Smith says it is we're in a low tax, low service state. And so in Austin, we have this environment where the government doesn't have the means necessarily to do all the things that it could do, maybe if we were in other states or cities. And so like food insecurity, for example, or just food in general in the city, we have a lot of nonprofits doing amazing work. But running nonprofits is really hard. I've been on a bunch of nonprofit boards, and one of the hardest things about running a nonprofit is the lack of predictability to it. And one of the not easiest, but one of the parts of government that fosters that kind of career politician mentality is the predictability of it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, what we need to do in Austin is we need to acknowledge as a city, hey, we can't do this work. Nonprofits are doing this work, whether that's on food insecurity, homelessness, music issues, etc. And we need to, as a city, create mechanisms to give those nonprofits more predictability. Like I imagine if the city of Austin codified some mechanisms that would ensure a baseline of support for some nonprofits, whether that's through land grants of space or facilities, things like that, then those nonprofits would be even more efficiently and better run than they already are. So we saw during the winter storm that food insecurity could very quickly become a very life and death issue for people in Austin.
And nonprofits did the government's work.
Yeah, and it is just because it's this very latent thing. It's very like, oh, I'm not going to do it until I have to. And it's like, no, like there are people who are lined up ready to do it even when you're not even thinking it's an issue. And so I think a lot of what we need to do is empower that community, because I mean, we have tens of thousands of nonprofit workers in this city. And I would almost treat nonprofit workers every bit as essential as people working in the health department or EMS.
We're
These are essential
interested in some
workers.
very specific proposals on this.
Oh yeah, I got a white paper coming on this in a month or two.
This is the.
Oh yeah, speaking of, I write a lot, as some of you know. I have a Substack. It's just joah.substack.com. Yesterday I shared an essay on why I believe the city of Austin should own at least one, if not two, music venues. Every month through December, I'm going to be sharing things like that. So I can tell you next month, I'm going to be writing about how our city needs to reimagine economic development from a regional standpoint. Later, I'm going to be writing about the nonprofit community and how we need to create some policies to support the nonprofit community. So please, when you read those, please share those out, because you know this is a campaign right now. It's very early. You're probably amongst my guess is there's 3,000 people total paying attention to the city council race.
And your opponents aren't being specific about shit.
Yeah, they're like in the clouds. I mean, they're talking about Palestine and Israel, and it's like, wait, but like, what about housing here? But they're whatever. So I really want to use that writing to show people that you're not just getting an entrepreneur, you're also getting someone who knows how to craft that spirit, the entrepreneurial spirit, into ideas for the city.
Are you looking to do one of these events downtown? I live downtown.
Yes.
So I guess I'm just happy to help y'all sponsor.
Please, yes.
Yeah, like
yes.
more just an open invitation.
Yeah.
I just donated the 400, so
Thank
you've got
you so
my
much.
email.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you have my email, so just, we'll connect.
No,
But
definitely.
I'd be very happy to help throw one of these parties.
Yeah. Well, if you have friends that live in Travis Heights, please share their names, emails, because we're having one in Travis Heights on May 17th. If you have friends in the Clarksville area, we're having one there on May 10th, which is next Tuesday. Let's see. If you have friends in the Hancock area, let me know. We have one there on May 11th. So we're trying to get to the point where we have at least one or two of these a week.
And this is like the right size, like 15 to 30.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, like,
yeah.
it's intimate.
This would be
everyone.
great. Like, I can get the mayor
Yep.
to come down for.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. You're in the W?
I'm at the W.
Oh, great. Well, Steve is a friend. So,
There we
yeah.
I was gonna say I would just send a note to the building and say anybody who wants.
That would be
to come
amazing.
Like that, and then
Yeah.
we have some food and that.
That'd be great.
I'd
That'd
be
be
happy
great.
to send everyone.
Yeah, that'd be great. Awesome.
Well, I do want to know, make sure that we enjoy the wonderful food today.
I know, but it's seriously, it's so good. That's why I ate before I started talking. It's so good.
Please eat, please eat. And if I may just say one
Oh
thing.
yeah.
When I got to know Joah a little bit, when
We were on a panel together too.
yes, it's the first time we really got to physically be in space and talk a little bit, which I really enjoyed and appreciated. But I got to know of Joah during the freeze, and I don't spend a lot of time on social media myself. But in that moment, I was trying to stay connected as possible, just because the work that we were doing at the center of that was felt really important. I think it was really important, and it was really fervent. And there are a few people that I felt that that were really connecting the dots, and that found a tone that didn't make me feel crazy and frustrated and losing my mind about it. And there is a lot of frustrations felt by many that were doing a lot of work. And I felt like Joah was one of the few and that could recapsule that information and was really working to get information out in a tone that made sense to everyone, and it made sense a lot of sense to me, and earned a lot of goodwill with me, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Okay, we're going to close it down now.